Hi, my name is Ben. I'm the CEO and co-founder of PurePressure, and today we're going to go over the setup and operation of your new Axis Trichome Separator. So with setup and operation today, we're going to be talking about quite a few different things. We'll start up by going over getting the cables free and separating the control stand from the Axis, routing those wires, hooking up power and compressed air for their first time. We'll be checking the motion of the machine. Then we'll bring a vessel in and we will check that the machine is parallel to the floor, not level. We'll go into that in detail. And we're going to talk about how to adjust your machine leveling feet to get it true and parallel to the floor. Then we're going to go through all the different guard and safety interlocks and make sure that everything's functioning properly. We'll go into paddle attachment, and then we'll bring a vessel in and we'll go over how to engage a vessel, line, lock it down, all of the basic operation and controls of this machine. And then in a separate video we'll be going over firmware in heavy detail and the controls and the touchscreen interface and how that interacts with the machine itself. Alright, these are the tools that you're going to need to do your Axis installation. You're going to need a 3/16 Allen, a 5/32 Allen, 5/16 nut driver or socket, a pair of snippers to cut your zip ties, Sharpie, adjustable crescent, large flathead, small Phillips, and an adjustable channel lock. So now that you've got your Axis uncrated, the first thing you're going to want to do is carefully cut the shrink wrap here so that we can move the control stand away from the Axis machine itself, which is going to help with machine placement. Now that the control stand's out of the way, we can remove this temporary shipping foot here, this bracket. This is used just to hold the machine in place during shipping, and we can take it and set it aside for now. Now that the control stand and the Axis are free, and you have some cable length here to allow for proper placement, we're going to remove the lifting eye up top, because we're no longer going to need that, assuming you have your machine where you want it. And we're going to replace the lifting eye with a cable support. Take a flathead screwdriver. With the provided threaded insert and the slot on the top, use a flathead screwdriver to install into the existing threads where you removed the eyelet. Make sure the insert is below the surface of the plate. Install the stud into the bottom of the cable support post and then thread the post into the threaded insert. Go until it's really tight. You can use a channel lock to get it really tight. Now that the cable support is installed, we're going to put the Axis control stand in the desired location. Now that the Axis control stand is in place, we can run the cable support rope from the top of this cable support post to the top of the other cable support post. These are adjustable in length with a Phillips screwdriver, And you'll want to adjust the height of your cable support post here using the 2 screws on the side of the control stand. You can bring this up so that it's right below ceiling height and matching the height of your control stand post on the other side. Each end of the cable support rope is going to have an adjustable clamp. 2 Phillips screws to remove it. It will come off in a clamshell 2-piece, and you can adjust the length of your rope. You have up to 10 feet radially in any direction between the 2 support posts. We're here at the cable support post on top of the axis. We're going to be putting the eyelet in with 2 washers on either side. And I like to face the eyelet towards the control stand, whichever direction that's going to be. In this case, we're going this way. Now at the control stand, we're going to get our cable support length right. So we're going to start by just putting the eyelet in hand tight, removing the clamp, and getting our cable length to be where we want it, and then we're going to mark that length, and I'll show you what to do from there. Same thing on this side, make sure your eyelet faces the axis. 2 washers on either side. We're just going hand tight. And then we're going to remove the clamp. Feed our rope through. And we're going to mark where we want to put our clamp with a Sharpie right here. Now that it's been marked, we can remove the eyelet and we'll put the clamp in on the ground where it's a little easier to work. Make sure that the screws aren't hung up on the rope, which they aren't. Now we're going to install this back up top. 2 washers on either side. And now we can go tight. Any excess cable can be tucked into the track with some light pressure. And now is a good time to finish cutting the shrink wrap holding the power cable in place. Now that the cable support rope is run, we're ready to run the conduit. and you may need to do an adjustment. We give you extra cable here in case you want to move the control stand a decent distance. You have up to 10 feet radially. So you can utilize any of this extra conduit. This is a little clip right here that you can undo and pull it out. But these guys up here, you'll want to squeeze them together and use a small flathead to pop it apart. And they just open right up. Put them back in. 2 clamps means it's tight. So go ahead and adjust your cable length as needed, and then we'll go up top and zip tie everything in place. Starting at the axis end, we're going to route our cable conduit along the upper support rope. Make sure you have a nice smooth bend radius here. We don't want any kinks. I'm just going to simply zip tie this in place, somewhat loose for now, and then I'll come back, tighten everything down, cut my zip ties. I like to have the cable support rope just on top of the conduit. It leaves a nice clean look. Not a bad idea to do doubles at the end, since that's where you get the most stress. And you'll want to go snug, but you do not need to go too tight, and you do not want to crush the conduit. And that is the end of cable routing. Now that the cables are run, we're ready to hook up power for the first time, as well as connect air on the back of the control stand for the first time. Before you connect air to your axis for the first time, you're going to want to make sure the head is locked in the up position and the lever is pointed all the way up. Make sure you only connect 120 psi max. The regulator on the back of the control stand is used to regulate the pressure that lifts the axis head. There's a secondary regulator that knocks this pressure down slightly, and that is what's used to lower the axis head. All right, so over here on this side of the axis, we have 2 cylinders that are responsible for the lifting of the relocating head. This one here is a gas spring, so it's charged to a fixed pressure of gas, and this provides a constant up force that pretty much brings the head to a neutral state. So if I disconnect air pressure, pull the pin, we should essentially become somewhat neutrally buoyant here. Okay? We'll slowly drift, but we're essentially neutral. So the air, what that's doing is assisting the lift up and down. So I just put it into the neutral position so it wouldn't move. Connecting my air, and we can go up and down. And the speed at which we go up and down is going to be controlled by these 2 dials right here. And these will be factory set so that your travel with the paddle is approximately, with the paddle installed, because the weight will change the speed, is approximately 11 seconds up and 11 seconds down. If you want to adjust the speed, this top dial will control the down speed, and you go in to go slower and back it out to go faster. The lower dial will control the up speed. Same thing, screw it in to go slower, back it out to go faster. But you do have the ability to adjust these. We will factory set them for you though. Now we're ready to power on for the first time. Now that you've powered on for the first time, you can see the home screen, and at the top right corner of the home screen you'll have indicators that will let you know the status of your interlocks as well as your motor enable switch. You should have only one of the three interlocks engaged right now, which is pivot locked. Your axis head should be raised into the up position, so position low and barrel engaged should not be engaged at this moment. Pivot locked means that the head is rotated into one of the two positions and that it's locked into place. That should be the only interlock that's satisfied at this time. Next, we're going to go install the guard and get a vessel in place so that we can level the machine and make sure that all of our interlocks are working properly before we start to do a test run. Now that power and air have been connected, let's talk about general movement of the axis and the relocating head. Right here is the toggle lever that controls the up-down motion, and the corresponding latch pin that locks the head in place when it goes to the highest vertical position. We also have a latch pin here used to release the head for pivoting. So you can see we're in the high position right now. If I pull a pivoting latch pin, it will lock into place at the other position, directly over this position on the left, whereas when it ships, it will probably come to you in the position on the right. Swing it back, pull the pin, swing it until it latches. To come down, pull the vertical release pin and push down on the toggle lever. Once movement starts, you no longer have to hold on to this toggle lever. To go up, flip the lever all the way up. You may also go to the middle position at any point to hold. You'll hear the vertical latch pin lock into place when the head is all the way in the vertical position. Again, every time you go down, you must pull the pin, flip the lever, and then you can let go of the pin. The second of the three interlocks, make sure that the relocating head is low enough, ensuring that the guard is concentrically oriented with the vessel. That switch is hidden behind the head, the relocating head of the axis, but it engages with this plate right here. When the head is low enough, this sensor will be engaged and you'll see position low on the HMI interface. The third and final interlock switch is located here where the guard mounts. When the guard engages a vessel, this plate will compress. We're going to take this cover off to show you that mechanism and also to aid with the leveling process of the axis. There's 4 screws to remove this cover, and you'll need a 5/16 hex socket or nut driver. Here at the paddle drive side of the axis, we can see the engagement plate that mounts to the guard. As this moves up, this small feed dog engages with the sensor that's mounted directly behind this plate here. We're going to use the gap between these two plates to tell us whether we're parallel with the floor or not. First, we've got to go install the guard. Now that you've got a vessel on an elevated dolly ready to go, you can take your guard out of the box. Should already have a stainless steel mounting ring pre-installed. Go ahead and set that on your vessel. make sure that it fits nicely. You may need to tuck the insulation around your vessel like this, just to make sure that everything sits nicely on the guard. And we're going to take this flat side of the stainless steel engagement ring, and we're going to align it with the flat on the aluminum receiving piece right here. So I'm just going to eyeball this, and then we're going to use the control lever to bring it down, and then we're going to go to the hold position and realign. Once you get it roughly concentric, you can lower the head all the way. The guard plate will compress, and then you can rotate the vessel until it nests into place. Now we can put the 3 screws, 1, 2, 3, and the guard will be fastened to the head of the axis. Now that the guard's mounted, we can go ahead, lift the head, and the guard should go with it. So you may be wondering why we've waited until now to start talking about leveling feet. And the reason is that we pretty much need to get to this setup in order to know if we are getting the machine parallel to the floor. And the reason I say parallel and not level is because we're not actually leveling the machine. You don't actually need a bubble level for this process at all. All we're going to do is make sure that this machine, the head of the axis, is parallel to the floor. And the reason for that is that this vessel here is at a fixed height, and it could be oriented in any direction here. And as I rotate it, if I were to make any level adjustment on this to make it true, as soon as I rotate it, that would no longer be valid. So since the vessel can be oriented in any direction, it's always going to be parallel to the floor at the location underneath the head of the axis. There's 2 different locations that we need to consider. So what we're going to do is engage the guard with the vessel, and we're going to look at our gap right up here on these plates, and we're going to tell if the machine is nodding in any direction. Before we do that, we're going to start by just getting the machine to a stable place and making sure that it's as parallel to the floor as we can make it before we bring the vessel in and check it at each location. Then we're going to check our sensors and make sure everything's engaging with the interlocks properly. And then we will have the machine officially set exactly how we want it, and we'll be ready to do some test runs. Whenever you're working on or under the machine, don't do what we've done and stand up and hit your head on the head of the axis. Be aware of where you're sitting before you get up. So the first thing that you're going to want to do in any scenario, no matter which situation you have with your floor or how it's rocking, is you're going to want to raise the middle leveling foot. So these are numbered in your user manual. We're going to start out, this is 1 up front here, 2 in the middle, 3 in the middle back, 4 on the right side over here, 5 on the left over there. And that's of course with you standing behind the machine, the right and left. So leveling foot 2 is dead center right here, and we're going to raise that up. And the reason we're going to do that is because it is just there for support, and you don't need more than 4 leveling feet to actually get the machine positioned. That 5th one is just there as a structural support. So we're going to start by loosening the jam nut, and then once that's loose, we can just raise the leveling foot until it's not touching the ground. Okay, check that we still have a left to right wobble, and we do. But we're stable on our middle two, we just have a left to right. So I'm going to start by adjusting this guy. I'm going to go just until the base stops turning, and that when you try to move it by hand, if it's tight, that means you know you've got a good engagement there. And we've got rid of our wobble here. So the next thing that we can do is bring a vessel in, and we'll check how our sensor engagement's looking, and then we'll decide if we need to make any adjustments from there. Now that we've got the machine stable, we're going to check the interlocks in both positions with one vessel, and we're going to evaluate the gap at the guard plate and determine if we need to make any adjustments on our leveling feet from there. Alright, so looking at our guard plate gap here, you can see that we're mated on this side. We've got a gap on the front side here, and it looks pretty even this direction. So that tells me that the machine is somewhat rocked back this direction, so we're a little bit high on that side that I adjusted. But we're going to look at the other side before we do any adjusting. I am mated on this side. I've got a gap on the back side, so that confirmed the exact same thing that I saw over there. I'm a little bit high on leveling foot 4, and I'm a little bit low on leveling foot 5. So I'm going to make an adjustment to those, and I'm going to check it again. So as I said before, we were a little bit high on this side here on leveling foot 4, so I'm going to raise that foot up, bring 5 down a little bit. Looks perfect. Check the other side. Looks pretty good. All right, so machine is stable, parallel to the floor. And the last steps that we need to do is remember to drop our center number 2 leveling foot, put that one on the ground. You don't want to raise the whole machine with it, you just want to set it there until it doesn't want to rotate. And then we're going to bring all of our jam nuts on all 5 up against the frame and tighten them so that the leveling feet can't move. So if you're having issues working the gap out of your guard plate, you know, that could be a number of things, but typically the best situation if you're having a gap, a continuous gap at the guard plate, is to lower the overall machine. We set it at a very neutral position, but if you lower the machine, you're going to get more guard engagement. The only cost of lowering the machine is clearance on the paddle as you swing over, but there should be plenty of that. You've got a 1/2 inch to come down. So if you're seeing an 1/8 of an inch gap here at the guard plate, then the whole machine needs to come down an 1/8 of an inch, assuming that's an even gap. If it's an uneven gap, then you'll want to tilt the machine, and once you get everything kind of parallel, it's not always going to be perfect left to right, but what you're really looking for is full engagement. So if the machine is set too high, then you will have a gap there, and you can bring all of your leveling feet up, which will bring the machine down. So now that all the leveling feet are set in place, the last thing before we put the guard cover on up here is to check that all the electrical switches and interlocks are satisfied on the touchscreen interface. So I'm going to drop the head down. And you'll notice that I get a blue light on the light tower up here on the control stand, and there's also a blue indicator right behind for the operator that's standing here at the control lever to see. Both of them are illuminated, which is a good sign. The only way that that light should be illuminated is if all 3 interlocks are satisfied. So now I'm going to look at my touchscreen interface here, and I see that all 3 interlocks have a blue light next to them, meaning that they're engaged. And I am able to now press the motor enable button, which is located right here by my knee on the front of the control panel. Now when I push that button, I should get a yellow indicator light up top as well as a yellow indicator light on my touchscreen interface. This is now going to tell me that the motor drive is live and the paddle will be able to operate with the joystick or with the programming of the touchscreen. And I should be able to verify that with a quick turn of the joystick. We can hear the servo and we can see the shaft spinning. So we're good to go on to the next step. So now that we've verified that the right position is working, we're going to do the same for the left. And you'll notice that when I lift the head, the yellow and the blue indicator lights are going to turn off immediately because one of the interlocks was open, and as soon as an interlock switch opens, the motor enable is killed. Motor enabled. Everything's looking good. We're now ready to put the guard cover back on the head, and we'll be ready for a test run, and we'll show you how to attach the paddle. Okay, when you're putting the guard on, the flange on the guard goes on top. And then you're going to reinstall the 4 screws. Alright, so now I'm going to show you how to install a paddle. This is a 65-gallon paddle right here. The coupler is on top. You'll notice a pin on a lanyard as well as a hygienic clamp. So the idea here is that inside of this coupler you can see a small pin, and that pin needs to key into the keyway on the shaft. So when you put this paddle on, you're going to push it up and rotate until it doesn't rotate anymore. Then you're going to take the pin and push it through all the way through the shaft. And then lastly, you're going to clamp with the lever here, and you can also pull this lever out and relocate the angle of the lever as you need to get a good clamp. And the clamp is going to make sure that there's no movement between the shaft and the paddle that would cause wear over time. So again, the operation, push it up, twist until it locks in, insert the pin, tighten it down, and you're good to go. So let's do that. So this is ready for use. Alright, so now that everything's together, we're going to talk about the interlocks one more time and show you again why there is a position low interlock. The main reason is for an off-center vessel. So let's say that instead of putting this in on center, I have it sitting over here. We lower our head and we get compression of the guard, so that one's satisfied, the pivot's satisfied, but the position low is not, and we don't get a blue light, and that's a good thing because I can stick my arm right inside the vessel here where the paddle can turn. So the difference in height between the top and bottom of this guard is enough that that interlock isn't going to engage. So I just wanted to demonstrate that for you guys, and then just by bringing the vessel concentrically so that it can fall inside of these grooves. We get a blue light, all three interlocks are satisfied. So let's say that you bring your guard down, but it doesn't want to nest with the vessel. That can be caused just from some bunching on the insulation right here. So you'll want to tuck, and you can push that insulation down and just kind of work it a little bit and make sure it's even, make sure there's no material bunched up underneath here. And once you do that, you should find that you get really nice guard engagement, even with the wash liner on, just like that. So the other thing I want to talk about is during the actual wash process, making sure that you lock your casters down there. There's 4 of them on each dolly, and you should always lock all 4 casters in place, and it really will lock the head in place, and it'll make sure that that pivot interlock doesn't open up while you're in a wash. If any of the interlocks open up while you're in a wash, I'll do that right now. We're going to immediately stop motor movement. We're going to lose our interlock lights, and we're going to get an error on the screen. And you're going to actually have to start over on that recipe. So it's something that we want to try to avoid. So making sure that you lock all of your casters every time you wash will really ensure the stability of the system during that wash process. Next, we're going to show you how to install a wash liner properly into a vessel, and then we will fill it with ice and water, and we'll do a demonstration, a wet demonstration for you. Alright, so here we have a wash liner for a 65 to be used in the Axis. The biggest difference that you'll notice are these food grade dowel supports that hold the bag open. Those are going to be supplied with the bag, but will need to be installed before use. And those will help keep this out of the way of the paddle. I've got one installed here, and you just go through the loops carefully and then push the plastic connector together and just put friction fit right there. So I'm going to now do this to the lower loop and just work my way around. Alright, now we're ready to install it into the vessel. So making sure you have your false bottom in there. Gently set this in, flip it over the edge, going to want to push the bottom so that it is nice and snug and tucked into the corner of the false bottom in the vessel. So we've got it all the way down. Then I'm going to gently pull, not to lift it, but just to remove the slack from the wall. So I'm just gently tugging down. I've got a perfect installation. Now I'm going to lock it in place. My draw cords. And this thing won't go anywhere. And we don't have to worry about the paddle interfering during the wash. You can see now, line this up. You should get really nice fitment. And if we were ready to wash, we would lock our dolly wheels and we'd be ready to roll. So now we're going to fill this with ice and water and we'll show you some movement. Okay, so we now have a vessel filled with ice and water, and one thing that you're going to want to pay attention to or know about before you do your first dry run, where in this case for the axis it would be a wet run, but is that this paddle here is essentially a giant tuning fork. So it will resonate when the ice is touching the paddle, and that noise can be a little concerning at first if you have no idea what it is, but just something to pay attention to and nothing to be concerned about. So we're going to drop the head and show you some paddle movement and talk about RPM and ramp, and so you can kind of see how those things actually affect the motion of the paddle and the type of agitation that we end up with because of it. I'm gonna lock my wheels in, all four. And you'll see that really makes this a rigid system. Okay, I've got a blue light, which means all I have to do is hit the motor enable button, and we should be free to move. Okay, to start out, we're going to use 20 RPM and a slow ramp, and you'll see directional changes are smooth, RPM is pretty low. I'm going to go down to the minimum RPM, which is 2. And you'll see that we're just creeping along, almost doing nothing, but just moving things a little bit. So now I'm going to go up to 50 RPM. And you'll see that the directional changes, they're still very smooth, but we've got some speed that we're building up. And 50 is kind of on the high end of what you'd want to be washing with. Alright, now I'm going to go up to 80, which is the absolute max, and I would not recommend this for washing in most scenarios because it's pretty aggressive. So you can see we're throwing water and ice everywhere. It's more than you should ever need, but that's what we wanted to give you. We wanted to give you the full spectrum from too slow to too fast. So let's bring it back to 50, a more reasonable maximum. and we're going to show you the different ramps and how that affects the agitation and how aggressive the agitation is. So 50 RPM slow ramp. Okay. Now we're going to go just from slow ramp to a medium ramp. You can see those directional changes are much quicker, much faster. Now we're going to go to a fast ramp. We can really beat things up, move it around really quickly, and this is good for really getting those trichomes out at the end of a wash, but maybe not something you want to start with. So a lot of people like to start really low and slow. Maybe they want to do like 10 RPM and slow, and we're just gonna move things around a little bit. And those trichomes that are ready to come off are gonna do so. And this is maybe our first wash, and maybe we'll break it up to 15 or 15 RPM right here. Another thing I'll bring up is I like to do directional changes frequently. Those induce turbulence, and this machine is not designed to just create a vortex and spin everything. That a singular vortex doesn't necessarily introduce very much agitation, and that's not what we're going for. So I'll bring things up to, this is 30 RPM here. So maybe a more middle of the road wash. And then we'll go up to 40 here. So you can see you have a lot to play with and a lot to think about, but just keep in mind that the ramp and the RPM can be played together to vary the different levels of agitation as well as the type and style of pattern that you create. So one thing I want to talk about is water height and ice content. Everybody's got their own style and method, but one thing that you will want to consider when filling your vessel is this top bar of the paddle here. Up here at the top of the paddle, you've got a big horizontal bar, and that, if it's right at the water line, it throws ice around and just pushes more than it mixes and agitates. So you really want to be above or below the top bar, preferably about an inch above it, and I'll demonstrate what that looks like right now. So as you can see, we're just below the surface of the water, and when I give it some movement here, you'll see that ice is able to flow over the top of the bar and not just get pushed around by it. So when operating the axis, obviously the flexibility of not having the vessels tied to the machine is why we're all here. So let's talk about that for a little bit, and filtration and how that's managed. Typically, just to keep hoses and trip hazards and clean walkways, I like to have my filtration station separate from my axis. So the way that I would manage that is when we're washing this vessel, we come and take this guy over to the filtration station, manage that, get the water pumped out with the hash pump into the bags and then pumped right back into the vessel, bring that thing over here, and then we can manage the hash collection from the bags offline. So while that's happening over there, this vessel is now back in place and ready to go. And this one just finished. So we lift, pivot, and drop, and we start washing over there. Then this guy, we unlock the casters, roll it over to the filtration station, and do it that way. Some people don't have room for all of that, and I totally understand. So you can obviously hook ports and hoses and fittings, everything up in place. Some people will even maybe not even utilize both positions because they don't have room to, in which case you can utilize one of the two positions and you don't even have to pivot your head. We do have an option coming soon for a bolt mount base, which will get rid of the big T-structure legs, and that can help for really small spaces as well, and some flexibility there. So contact us if you have a unique operation and you need some help. But I guess that's all I have to say about that. So let's talk vessel numbering and tagging. So we have another video on the firmware operation of the Axis linked here, and in that video we talk about how you can track your batches with the firmware, and you can view that in the history on the main menu. So the way that that's done is obviously we have to track our vessel, and we do that with these numbering tags. So we have these available, and you can just Sharpie a number on there. I like to put it right on the sight glass, so it's nice, easy location to view. So every time I drop the head into this vessel and I start a recipe, I'm going to plug in vessel number 1. And I've got number 2 here, I'll fix that to this vessel over here, and so on and so forth. So you could have as many as you want in process and going through rotation of washing, and you're not going to lose track. Alright, thanks for watching the setup and operation of the Axis. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Our contact info will be in the description below, and check us out on social media or hop on our website, purepressure.com. Thanks.